Darth Vader walked slowly down the metallic corridor of the Imperial ship, his mechanical breathing echoing off the cold walls. The officers around him kept their heads down, aware of the Dark Lord's overwhelming presence. The announcement of the capture of a rebel ship was nothing new, but this time there was a special prisoner. The Princess of Alderaan was on board, and her reputation as one of the leaders of the rebellion preceded her capture. Vader wasn't expecting anything unusual other than yet another arrogant insurgent. But as soon as he ordered her to be brought to him, he felt something different. The Force oscillated slightly, as if trying to tell him something. He ignored the sensation for the moment and waited for the prisoner to arrive. The soldiers pushed her into the interrogation room and the door sealed behind her. Leia walked steadily to a stop in front of Vader, her defiant gaze fixed on the shadowy figure in front of her. He studied her posture, her haughty, unwavering expression. Over the years, he had interrogated many rebels, but there was something about her that bothered him. The glint in her eyes, the way she held her head high, the coldness of her answers. It wasn't just aristocratic pride. There was something deeper, something he couldn't immediately name. The argument between the two of them began, every word of it charged with indignation and firmness. And then, in the middle of the verbal clash, it happened. For an instant, Vader was silent. His gaze remained fixed on Leia, but his mind was transported to a distant memory. He had seen that look before, not in the rebels nor in the politicians of the Republic. It was a look that was so familiar that the impact hit him like an invisible blow. Padme. Time seemed to freeze around him as his mind filled with images of the woman he had loved. The day he first saw her, the moment she defied him in the Senate, the instant she begged for his redemption on Mustafar. Leia didn't just look like Padme. She was the very living reminder of the woman he had lost. For a brief moment, Leia's voice became a distant echo, and he fought against the storm brewing in his mind. The Emperor had told him that his son had died with Padme. So why did this young woman possess her features? Why did her presence seem so right? His breathing became heavier, and he rolled onto his back, trying to pull himself together. If there had been any trace of doubt, the Force dispelled it completely. It vibrated around Leia in an intense, grandiose way. Powerful. He could no longer ignore it. The Force in her was strong. The revelation consumed him completely, and his mind refused to believe it. Could it be a coincidence? No, he knew. Everything fitted together with cruel precision. His instinct screamed the truth that he didn't want to accept. He ordered the guards to take her to her cell, without showing the disturbance that overwhelmed him. He needed to think. With his fists clenched, he stood motionless in the center of the room, feeling his anger growing, not against the young woman, but against himself, against the Emperor, against the lie he had lived for almost 2 decades. The Emperor had lied to him. The weight of this discovery made him cross the room with heavy steps, as if he wanted to flee from the inevitable conclusion. But the Force wouldn't allow him to escape. He still felt Leia's presence like a burning flame. It wasn't just appearance, it wasn't just temperament. The revelation made his mind spin, and without hesitation, he ordered her to be brought back. When Leia was placed in front of him again, her voice, although cold, came out with a different weight. "Who is your family?" he asked, analyzing her every reaction. Leia stood her ground. "I am the daughter of Bail Organa." Vader tilted his head slightly. "Daughter?" Leia nodded, proud. "Yes, in fact, they adopted me when I was still a baby. To me, they're my real parents." The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with absolute precision. The answer exploded in his mind like thunder. He looked at her, but this time not just with his eyes, but with the Force. And he felt it. Absolute confirmation. Leia was his daughter. Vader's mechanical breathing echoed louder as his mind drowned in the revelation. All those years of believing that all was lost, that his lineage had died with Padme. But there she was, alive, strong, defiant. What would have happened if he had known earlier? If he'd had the chance to protect her? Anger bubbled up inside him. Not against Leia, but against Palpatine, who had stolen everything from him. He paced back and forth, feeling his frustration take over. If Palpatine lied about this, what else would he have lied about? He stopped suddenly and turned to the young woman, who was looking at him suspiciously. "How old are you?" he asked. Leia arched an eyebrow, not understanding his insistence, but answered, 19. Silence settled over the room. It had been exactly 19 years since Padme had left. Since he had been consumed by grief. It was the exact time. The final conclusion took hold of his being. He didn't need any more proof. He knew, not just with logic, but with the Force. She was his daughter, his blood, his inheritance. Vader turned slowly to the ship's control panel, his presence filling every corner of the room. The decision had been made. It didn't matter what came next, no matter what consequences it would bring. He looked forward and gave the order that would change the course of the galaxy. Change course. We're going to Alderaan. The immense Imperial ship hovered above the atmosphere of Alderaan, its colossal size casting a shadow of oppression over the planet. Darth Vader watched the surface below, his gaze fixed on the grandeur of the royal city. The presence of the Force vibrated around him, and he felt that this trip could change everything. Leia remained in custody, isolated in a cell inside the ship, without any explanation of Vader's plans. He needed to find out the whole truth before confronting her again. If Bail Organa created her, then he would know everything about her origin. And if there were any more hidden secrets, he would tear them out by force. Vader's ship descended gently onto the landing pad of Alderaan's royal palace. Imperial troops took up position, surrounding the site, as Vader descended the ramp, his cape fluttering in the wind. Bail Organa was already waiting for him, his expression full of concern and a visible tension in his gaze. He knew that nothing good could come of this unexpected visit. The ruler of Alderaan kept his composure as Vader approached. "Lord Vader, what is the reason for this very direct visit?" asked Bail, trying to hide the tension in his voice. Vader didn't bother with formalities and got straight to the point. "Your daughter, Princess Leia. I want to know the truth about your origin." Bail felt his blood run cold. The threat in Vader's voice was clear, but he couldn't give everything away. "My daughter was adopted as a baby," he said calmly, avoiding details. "My wife and I have always wanted a child, and Leia was a blessing." Vader tilted his head slightly, analyzing every word. He felt the underlying lie, felt the Force subtly tremble around Bail. "And who are the real parents?" pressed Vader, his voice deep and without room for maneuver. Bail hesitated for a moment, but held firm. "We never knew. She was handed over to us by a network of trusted allies." Vader's patience was wearing thin. He turned, walking slowly across the room, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor. Then, without warning, he raised his hand and activated an Imperial communicator. "Prepare the Death Star. If Alderaan doesn't give me the answers I want, this planet will be reduced to dust." Bail felt the weight of the threat like a punch in the stomach. His face hardened. He knew Vader wasn't bluffing. He could watch his world be destroyed just to get the truth out. With no choice, Bail closed his eyes for a moment and, with a resigned sigh, decided to tell the truth. "Leia is Padmé Amidala's daughter," he said, his voice deep. "And Anakin Skywalker." The name resounded in Vader's mind like thunder. Anakin Skywalker, a name he himself had buried years ago. The confirmation, now coming from Bail's mouth, made everything real. The Empire had deceived him. He had had a daughter, and she had been kept hidden from him all these years. Under pressure from Vader, Bail continued, "Obi-Wan and Yoda were there when she was born," Bail continued, keeping a calculated eye on Vader. "They protected her identity so that she would never be found by the Empire." Vader was silent. For a moment, only the sound of his mechanical breathing filled the room. His anger grew, but something inside him prevented him from losing control. Bail watched intently, waiting for his reaction. Vader could kill him right there. He could exterminate Alderaan as punishment. But he didn't. Bail knew that his silence had kept Leia safe, but he also knew that by hiding the truth from Vader, he was creating a dilemma within the Dark Lord. If he killed him now, Leia would come over to his side. And, as much as he didn't want to admit it, Vader knew he couldn't keep her from him. He looked directly at Bail, his voice coming out controlled but laden with menace. "You live, for now." With a sudden movement, he turned and left the room, leaving Bail feeling the weight of the decision he had made. The war he had been trying to avoid for years had just begun. As soon as Vader returned to the ship, Bail acted immediately. He grabbed a coded communication device and sent an urgent message. His heart was racing. If Vader knew about Leia, he would hunt down everyone involved. And that meant Obi-Wan and Yoda were in danger. The message was direct. "Kenobi, he's found out. Leia is at risk. He can come after you." On Tatooine, Obi-Wan received the transmission and felt a chill. It was the moment he had been dreading since the day he took Luke to that desert planet. If Vader now knew about Leia, it wouldn't be long before he found out about Luke. He had to act. Without wasting any time, Obi-Wan went to Luke, who was working on the farm. The young man sensed the concern on Kenobi's face and knew that something serious was going on. "Luke, I need to tell you the truth. There's no more time to wait," said Obi-Wan. The boy frowned, confused. "The truth about what?" Obi-Wan took a deep breath. "About your father, and about your sister." Shock overtook Luke. He had always wondered about his father, but he had never expected to hear something like this. "My sister," Obi-Wan nodded. "Leia Organa, and your father, Darth Vader." Silence hung between them. Luke seemed unable to process everything. "My father is Darth Vader." Obi-Wan nodded ruefully. His real name was Anakin Skywalker, a great Jedi before he was corrupted by the dark side. The weight of the revelation fell on Luke like a blow. But before he could ask more, Obi-Wan placed a hand on his shoulder. "There's no time for doubt. If Vader finds out about you, he'll come after you too. We need to find Yoda. Your training needs to start now." Luke swallowed. His world had just been turned upside down. But if Leia was in danger, he couldn't stand idly by. Obi-Wan and Luke set off for the swampy planet. When they reached the damp, mysterious swamp, Yoda was already waiting for them, sitting on a rock, his eyes closed. He didn't need to open his mouth to know what was happening. "He's found out. The secret is no longer a secret," he muttered. Obi-Wan knelt before him. "Master, we need your guidance. Luke must begin his training immediately. Leia's life depends on it." Yoda opened his eyes, his expression filled with concern. "Yes, either Leia bows, or she will be killed." Silence filled the planet, and Luke felt the weight of his responsibility. His fate had just been sealed. His training as a Jedi would begin at that moment. Darth Vader walked through the gloomy corridors of the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, his black cloak rippling with each firm, calculated step. His destination was the Emperor's chamber. He needed to report what he had discovered. Leia was not just a rebellious princess. She was his daughter. And if that was true, then she was a powerful tool who could be molded to serve the Empire. Palpatine was sitting on his throne when Vader entered. The Sith raised his yellow eyes and analyzed his apprentice. "Tell me, Lord Vader, what have you discovered?" Vader didn't hesitate. "She is strong in the Force. My daughter, Padmé's daughter." The Emperor smiled slightly. "Interesting. Then we have another Skywalker." Palpatine remained silent for a moment, reflecting. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Has she already been trained?" Vader denied. "No, but the Force is strong in her. She could be useful to us." The Emperor smiled, pleased. "Then make her choose, Lord Vader. The Force does not accept indecision. Either she joins us, or she dies." The order was clear. Vader nodded slowly. Part of him knew that the threat against Leia was real. Palpatine wouldn't hesitate to destroy her if he couldn't use her. He needed to convince her to ally herself with the Empire. And to do that, he would have to seduce her with power and purpose. Upon returning to his ship, Vader ordered Leia to be brought before him. The young princess was escorted by 2 guards and positioned in front of him. Her gaze was one of defiance, but also of caution. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground. At the crucial moment, he remained silent for a few moments, watching her intently. Then, with a firm, deep voice, he uttered the words that would change everything. "I am your father." The impact of the revelation was immediate. The air seemed to become heavy around her, and for an instant, the world stopped. Leia felt a knot tighten in her chest, her mind refusing to accept. That can't be true," she muttered, trying to pull herself together. But Vader stepped forward, and the truth was sealed. "You feel it, Leia, the force between us. You know it's real." Vader watched her for a few seconds before speaking. "You have immense potential. The force is in your blood. You can choose to become something much greater than a simple rebel princess." Leia kept her posture upright, but felt a chill when she heard the word, "daughter." "Do you want me to become like you?" she asked, her voice laced with contempt. Vader ignored the provocation and continued. "The dark side of the Force can give you power, Leia. You have a talent for politics, influence, intelligence. With my training, you could rule the galaxy at my side. Together, we would be unstoppable." Leia felt the weight of the proposal. If she refused immediately, she knew she would be putting Alderaan at risk. She would need time to find a way out. "I need to think," she said, her voice calculated. "A decision like this can't be made impulsively." Vader was silent for a moment, but he was no fool. "You have little time, Leia. Choose wisely." Meanwhile, Luke's training began under the guidance of Obi-Wan and Yoda. Kenobi was in charge of the physical training. During the day, Luke underwent tests of endurance, balance, and lightsaber combat. Obi-Wan gave him no rest, forcing him to hone his dexterity and speed. In the evenings, Yoda guided him through theoretical studies, explaining the history of the Jedi Order, the principles of the Force, and the mistakes of the past. But what intrigued Luke most was learning about Darth Vader. "He wasn't always like this," said Obi-Wan one evening. "His real name was Anakin Skywalker. He was one of the most powerful Jedi who ever lived." Luke absorbed every word, trying to understand his father's fate. "And how can I defeat him?" he asked. Yoda sighed. "Defeat is not simple. To control your own darkness, you must first." Luke didn't fully understand, but he felt that the battle against Vader wasn't just physical. He needed to strengthen his mind as much as his body. Yoda guided him in deep meditation, teaching him to listen to the Force. Little by little, Luke began to feel the energy around him, connecting in ways he had never imagined before. As Luke evolved, Vader decided that Leia couldn't wait any longer. He entered her cell and remained silent for a moment, watching her. "The time has come, Leia," he said, his voice imposing. "Either you join me, or the Empire will have no further use for you." Leia's heart raced. She knew this meant death. Even reluctantly, she realized that she had no choice. "I accept," she said, keeping her expression cool. "I will ally myself with you." Vader tilted his head, analyzing her. He felt the lie in the Force, but he didn't care. The first step had been taken. Vader took Leia to Coruscant to swear allegiance to the Emperor. As she entered the throne room, Leia felt a chill. Palpatine's presence was suffocating. The Emperor smiled as he saw her kneel before him. "A wise decision, Princess," he said, his voice laced with venom. "Now your real training begins." But Vader had plans of his own. He didn't want Leia to be turned into a Sith warrior. He wanted something different. "She must learn to use the Force for something greater," he told Palpatine. "She's a strategist, a leader. If trained correctly, she could be more powerful than any Sith has ever been." Leia's training began, but in a different way to Luke. While he learned the light side, she learned how to manipulate the dark side for political ends. Vader taught her that the Force could be used to control others, to predict movements, to arouse fear and loyalty. "Trust your primitive instincts," he said. "Anger, ambition, the desire to win. It is these forces that will give you power." Leia absorbed what she could, but in her heart, her real plan was different. She had to find a way to escape. Bail Organa sent a coded message to Obi-Wan. informing him that Leia had joined Darth Vader and was safe. He knew she was just buying time, but for the Empire, the illusion of her loyalty would be enough to allay immediate suspicions. This news, although worrying, brought a brief respite for Obi-Wan and Yoda. With a serene look on his face, Yoda muttered, "More time to train Luke we have." Without the imminent threat of Imperial pursuit, the young Skywalker could strengthen his connection to the Force and prepare for the inevitable confrontation to come. Time passed and Luke honed his skills, becoming a formidable warrior, prepared to face any threat that came his way. His mastery of the Force had reached extraordinary levels, allowing him to sense and predict his opponent's movements with precision. Obi-Wan and Yoda were molding not just a warrior, but a true Jedi, someone who carried with him the hope of the galaxy. Meanwhile, Leia followed a different path, immersed in the teachings of Vader and Palpatine. Although she delved into the dark side, learning manipulation, fear, and power, she never allowed herself to be corrupted. Leia, in her quest for knowledge, developed a rare and powerful gift, the ability to see beyond time. She began to have visions of the past and the future, fragments of intertwined realities that showed her both what had been and what could be. In her moments of meditation, she saw images of Padme, her mother, and felt the love she bore for Anakin, a love that somehow still existed within Vader. These visions made her understand something essential. Her father was not just the cold machine that Palpatine had molded. Inside him, a flame still raged, and perhaps there was a chance to rekindle it. But Leia's time was running out. Palpatine was becoming suspicious of her hesitation, and Vader, although he trained her with dedication, also realized that her surrender to the dark side was not complete. It was in one of these moments of uncertainty that, on the other side of the galaxy, Luke felt a deep grip on the Force. During a day of meditation, his mind was flooded with a terrible feeling. Leia was in danger. Time was running out. They had to act before it was too late. Without hesitation, Luke communicated his vision to Obi-Wan and Yoda. It was time to set off to rescue her. With the help of the Rebel Alliance, Bail Organa provided a captured Imperial fighter, allowing Luke, Obi-Wan, and a small group of fighters to infiltrate the Imperial ship where Leia was being held. Using disguises and stealth tactics, they advanced through the ship's metal corridors, neutralizing stormtroopers as they approached Leia's quarters. Luke felt his sister's presence with increasing intensity, guided by the Force to the right spot. But as they opened one of the main doors, they came across an imposing silhouette. Darth Vader was there, waiting for them. Behind him, Leia stood motionless, watching the scene with an indecipherable gaze. Vader advanced a few steps, his presence dominating the atmosphere. "I knew you'd come, Obi-Wan," he said in his deep, mechanical voice. "I see you have a new apprentice." Luke tightened his grip on his lightsaber, but remained calm. Obi-Wan, with a firm gaze, replied, "Yes, but this one will be different from his father." Silence hung in the air. For a moment, Vader didn't reply, as if those words had struck a chord inside him. It was then that Leia closed her eyes and concentrated on the Force. And in the next instant, she knew. She felt the truth as an inevitable revelation. Luke was her brother. Leia's eyes widened, and she looked at Vader, at Luke, and then at Obi-Wan. "It can't be," she muttered. But Vader felt the same surge in the Force and took a step back. "That can't be true," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. Obi-Wan nodded. "Yes, Padme was pregnant with twins. I was there during the birth. Luke is her son." The impact of the revelation was undeniable. Luke, sensing that this was the decisive moment, stepped forward and, in a voice charged with emotion, said, "Father, there's still good in you. Come with us and help us restore the Republic." Leia, still processing the revelation, felt an overwhelming emotion and tears streamed down her face. Looking directly at Vader, she said sincerely, "I feel it too. There's still good in you." But Vader's reaction was brutal. In an impulse of anger and denial, he raised his hand and used the Force to throw Leia against the wall. She fell to the floor, stunned. Luke, overcome with fury, drew his lightsaber and advanced on his father. Obi-Wan tried to stop him. "Luke, wait!" But it was too late. The clash of blades lit up the room in an intense blue and red glow. The duel between Luke and Vader was fierce. Luke attacked with speed and aggression, his blows full of emotion. Vader blocked, backing away slowly, feeling the raw energy of his son. Obi-Wan joined the fray, trying to create an opening to disarm Vader. The fight intensified, the sound of sabers echoing through the room. But while Vader fought, his mind was in conflict. Luke and Leia's words reverberated in his soul, destroying the certainties he believed he had. Padme's face appeared in his mind, the memory of her words, "There's still good in you." It was then that something changed. Leia, recovering from the impact, sensed Vader's hesitation. More than ever, she knew it was time. She rose with difficulty and, in a firm tone, said, "Father, it's not too late." Vader felt the Force flow through his daughter, felt the same warmth he had once experienced at Padme's side. His saber trembled in his hands. For the first time in decades, he hesitated. Luke took advantage of the gap, disarming Vader with a precise blow, sending his saber crashing to the ground. In an instant of vulnerability, Anakin Skywalker began to awaken inside Darth Vader's armor. Silence filled the room. Luke and Leia stood side by side, watching their father kneel, his breathing unsteady. Palpatine would sense it. They knew there was no turning back. But something inside Vader had changed. The weight of the past was overwhelming, but the call of his children was stronger. The darkness inside him was beginning to crumble. Darth Vader's time was running out. Anakin Skywalker's time was about to begin again. Suddenly, a blast of lightning cut through the room, hitting Obi-Wan squarely before he could react. The Jedi Master screamed in pain as he was thrown against the wall, falling unconscious. In the darkness, a hooded figure slowly emerged, his overwhelming presence enveloping the room. Emperor Palpatine had arrived. His cold smile reflected his satisfaction at eliminating the biggest obstacle to his supremacy. "Kenobi has always been a hindrance. Now only the new generation remains," he said, his voice laced with malice. He looked at Luke and Leia, his yellow eyes shining. "You have unlimited potential. Join me and rule the galaxy as the rightful heirs to the Empire." Luke felt a shiver run through his body. The temptation was there, like a dark whisper in his mind. Leia, beside him, stood her ground, knowing exactly how Palpatine manipulated his targets. "You can be more powerful than Vader ever was," the Emperor continued, slowly approaching Luke. "The galaxy is already yours. All you have to do is accept your destiny, alongside your sister." But Luke didn't hesitate. He looked at Leia and then at his father, still kneeling and torn between the past and the present. "Never," he replied firmly. "I will never follow that path." Palpatine frowned and let out a disappointed sigh. "Then die," he said coldly, raising his hands. Rays of pure Force energy shot out of his fingers, hitting Luke squarely. The young Jedi screamed, falling to the ground as he tried to resist the excruciating pain. The dark energy coursed through his body, draining his strength rapidly. "Father, help me," he shouted, his voice filled with despair. Vader remained motionless for a moment. He looked at Palpatine, then at his son, and an avalanche of memories hit him. It was Mustafar again. It was Padme dying in front of him. It was the broken promise to bring peace. But above all, it was Luke crying out for help, just as Anakin had once done. His hands trembled, and then he made his decision. Vader advanced to stop Palpatine, but Leia saw the danger before he could even realize it. She knew that the rays of the Force would kill her father before he could complete his act of redemption. "Father, no!" she shouted, raising her hands. Using all the knowledge she had absorbed from Palpatine, she channeled the Force and pushed Vader backwards, away from danger. She felt the dark flow of energy around her, and, for the first time, decided to use it against her own master. The Force flowed through Leia like an uncontrolled river. In a single movement, She raised her hands and unleashed an intense blast of Force lightning, stunning Palpatine. The attack hit him with a violence he hadn't expected, sending him reeling backwards, screaming in pain. The crackling energy enveloped him, and his shadowy figure began to crumble in front of the Skywalker family. His eyes widened in shock as he realized that he had been defeated not by brute force, but by the knowledge he himself had passed on. With a final cry, Palpatine fell into the great void of the ship, his form disappearing into the eternal shadows. The Empire had finally lost its master. Vader watched it all in silence, his mind still absorbing the events. For the first time in decades, he felt the Force in its purest form, without the bonds of pain and hatred. The transition was complete. He was no longer Darth Vader. He was Anakin Skywalker again. And now only one last mission remained: to repair everything he had destroyed. He went to the Imperial High Command and used his position to dissolve the Sith's domain, ensuring that power returned to the Senate. The war was over. The Empire would now be rebuilt under the leadership of those who sought peace, not domination. With Anakin's help from afar, Luke, Obi-Wan, and Yoda gathered together the few survivors of the old Jedi Order and set about rebuilding it. No longer bound by the rigid dogmas of the past, the new Jedi would be shaped by the understanding and balance of the Force. Meanwhile, Leia followed her own path. Elected Chancellor, she used her connection to the Force to rule with a wisdom never before seen in the history of the galaxy. Her gift for predicting events and her political skill ensured a fair and prosperous government. For the first time in a long time, the galaxy knew a new dawn, one where the Skywalker legacy would bring hope instead of destruction.